All right, let's just jump right into it. Today, we're doing an explainer on some incredibly fascinating and honestly profoundly challenging source material. We're looking at Chapter 3 of the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, which is titled More About Alcoholism. And what's really interesting here is that we're going to completely bypass the typical sterile clinical definitions of addiction. Instead, we're going to unravel a deeply baffling psychological mystery that the authors lay out. It's this exact mystery that has literally confounded doctors, families, and the people suffering from addiction for generations.
So it really all begins with this one giant central question. Why can't they just stop? I mean, we hear this all the time, right? People on the outside ask, why don't you just drink like a gentleman? Or, just quit. Or they think, man, his willpower must just be incredibly weak. This question basically sets up the entire narrative arc of this chapter. Why does an alcoholic inevitably return to that very first drink, even when they fully 100% know the catastrophic consequences that are waiting for them? If hundreds of past experiences have proven to them that taking just one drink leads to utter ruin, or the loss of their family, or landing in a hospital bed, why on earth do they do it again? Well, to understand this, the text points us to a very specific state of mind.
And that state of mind is driven by what the text calls the great obsession. The authors are super clear here. They state that the great obsession of every abnormal drinker is this powerful, deep-seated delusion. It's the belief that somehow, someday, they're going to be able to control and enjoy their drinking just like regular people do. And the persistence of this illusion is absolutely astonishing. The source material actually notes that many people will pursue this idea right up to the gates of insanity or death. So according to this chapter, the absolute first step to any kind of recovery is completely smashing this delusion. The individual has to concede, deep down to their innermost self, that they are fundamentally not like other people when it comes to alcohol. But smashing that delusion is incredibly hard, mostly because of the exhaustive lengths people will go to maintain it. The text outlines these countless, completely vain attempts that alcoholics make to prove to themselves they can drink normally. It's like this exhausting routine of mental gymnastics. They try drinking only beer, or they try strictly limiting the number of drinks. They swear they'll never drink alone, never drink in the morning, only drink at parties. Maybe they try switching from scotch to brandy, or drinking only natural wines. They take a trip, then they try not taking a trip. They swear off forever with a solemn oath. They read inspirational books, go to health farms. I mean, the list literally goes on and on ad infinitum. It is a breathless, relentless effort, all just to prove they can safely consume alcohol. Now, to challenge all of that behavior, the book actually throws down this shockingly bold and simple self-diagnosis for anyone secretly harboring the idea that they might not actually be an alcoholic. It says, step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Just try to drink and then stop abruptly and try it more than once. The authors state that it really won't take long for you to decide, as long as you're being honest with yourself. Now, it might give you a bad case of the jitters, sure, but it will give you a full, undeniable knowledge of your actual condition.
And if you try that and find that you cannot stop, well, then you are dealing with a progressive condition. The authors make a very grounded, serious assertion right here. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. They are utterly convinced that alcoholics of their type are in the grip of a progressive illness, meaning over any considerable period of time, the sufferer gets worse, never better. They actually compare it to someone who has lost their legs. They never grow new ones. There's just no known treatment that can turn an alcoholic of this type back into a normal drinker.
To really drive this point home, the text recounts this deeply tragic timeline. Just consider this man's life for a second. So here was this ambitious guy who at age 30 realized he was losing control of his drinking. He makes a firm resolution to stay completely bone dry until he is successful and retired. And amazingly, he did it. He remained sober for 25 years and built this highly successful business. But then, at age 55, he retired. And he fell victim to this belief that a quarter-century of sobriety and intense self-discipline had essentially cured him. So out came his carpet sippers, and out came a bottle. Within 2 short months, he was in the hospital, completely puzzled and humiliated. And despite all his money and resources, he went to pieces rapidly, and within 4 years, he was dead. It's a stark story that powerfully demonstrates the text assertion that time alone is absolutely no defense. And this brings us directly to the crux of our whole mystery. Why did that man pick up the drink after 25 years? The real problem isn't just the physical act of drinking itself. It's the strange mental blank spot that happens right before it. The book refers to this as the subtle insanity. It's a baffling mental state that precedes a relapse. It's this wild moment where all logic, all memory of past suffering, and all that profound knowledge of the stakes are just inexplicably pushed aside. To show exactly how this strange mental state operates, the text provides some really striking case studies. For instance, meet Jim. Jim is a car salesman. He's got a charming wife, a family, and unfortunately, a history of being committed to an asylum because of his violent drunkenness. He knows with absolute certainty that he faces another trip to the asylum and the total loss of his family if he drinks. He has sound reasoning. But then, one Tuesday, he stops at a roadside diner. He orders a sandwich and a glass of milk. Then he orders another sandwich and another glass of milk. And suddenly this thought just crosses his mind that if he were to put an ounce of whiskey into his milk, it couldn't hurt him because he's on a full stomach. I mean, that is the insane excuse. So he pours the whiskey into the milk, feels totally reassured by this little experiment, and orders another. And just like that, Jim is on his way right back to the asylum. The text points out how profound knowledge of the absolute worst-case scenario is just effortlessly replaced by this casually insane delusion about a glass of milk.
Now, the authors definitely recognize how totally crazy this sounds to an outside observer. So, to explain the sheer absurdity of the alcoholic's mindset, they introduce this slightly humorous but incredibly dark analogy. They write that the alcoholic's behavior when it comes to that first drink is as absurd and incomprehensible as an individual who just has an absolute passion for jaywalking. Let's just trace this jaywalker's journey to destruction the way the text lays it out. Step 1. Picture this guy who just gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys doing it for a few years, completely ignoring all warnings. Then, step 2, his luck runs out. He gets hit, suffers a fractured skull, breaks his arm, he promises everyone he'll stop, but within weeks, he's right back out on the streets and boom, breaks both legs. Finally, step 3, his life falls apart. He loses his job, his wife divorces him, he even goes to an asylum to try and mend his ways. But the very day he gets out, he races right in front of a speeding fire engine and breaks his back. Now, you would call this man crazy, right? Well, the authors state that if you simply substitute the word jaywalking with alcoholism, this exact illustration perfectly fits the alcoholic's journey.
So, you might be thinking at this point, well, what if someone is just incredibly intelligent? Like, what if they undergo intense therapy and gain a profound understanding of their own psychology? Is self-knowledge the cure? Does knowing exactly why you drink somehow stop this subtle insanity from taking over? To answer this, the text provides one final, really striking case study. Let's look at the story of Fred. Fred is a highly successful, totally well-balanced partner in an accounting firm. He's got an attractive personality, he's a great father, and honestly, he has zero obvious excuses to drink. But after ending up in the hospital with the jitters, Fred takes the time to learn all about this illness. He gains deep, profound self-knowledge and is absolutely positive that his humiliating hospital experience, plus his high intelligence, will definitely keep him sober. Self-knowledge is going to fix it. But a while later, Fred is in Washington, D.C., and actually, he has a perfect, stress-free day. He goes to dinner, and suddenly, out of nowhere, a mental blank spot hits. He carelessly orders a cocktail. In a fraction of a second, he entirely forgets everything he learned. All of his self-knowledge, all of his stability. He just wakes up back in the hospital, completely defeated. Fred's story is used to prove that even highly intelligent people who completely understand their condition can just entirely forget everything they know in an instant. And this brings us to the final, incredibly stark realization that the text drives home. The ultimate conclusion of Chapter 3 is that for a true alcoholic, there is simply no effective mental defense against the first drink. None. Willpower, no matter how remarkably strong it might be in business or in daily life, is utterly useless against the mental blank spot. Self-knowledge, no matter how profound, provides absolutely no protection when the subtle insanity hits. The authors conclude that because human intelligence and human willpower are completely powerless against this specific phenomenon, the defense must come from a higher power. And that leaves us with a really profound and heavy thought to consider. If the absolute strongest human willpower, the sharpest intellect, and the deepest self-knowledge consistently fail against this strange, subtle insanity, what kind of defense is truly required? It really forces us to ponder the terrifying limits of human control when faced with such a baffling condition. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I hope this deep dive into the source material has given you a whole new perspective on the mental battle of addiction.